Hello, everyone. My name is Gabby, and I never really know what to expect, huh? I'm just going about my everyday business, and then suddenly I see there's a Danganronpa 2 remake being announced. For those of you who don't know, Danganronpa 2 is probably one of my favorite games of all time, ever since I played it first in 2019. I streamed a replay of the whole game on Twitch a few years ago, and I saved the VODs onto YouTube. So obviously, whoever was previously in the bathroom had a shit that was so powerful it made a hole in the floor. They used the hole in the floor to go under the old building and stab Byakuya through the floorboards. So there we go. Case solved. Whoever was in the bathroom, it was through the power of shitting. So this announcement immediately gave me a lot to speculate about, and I have a lot of thoughts. So if this isn't going to be a video, I don't know what would be. I have to say these things before it comes out, so I know how right or wrong I was on what the game ended up being. So let's talk about Danganronpa 2x2. For a basic summary, Danganronpa 2 is the second game in the Danganronpa series, a murder mystery adventure game series developed by Spike Chunsoft, where a group of Japanese high schoolers are trapped by a psychotic robot bear mascot called Monokuma and told that the only way they can leave is by murdering one of their classmates and successfully getting away with it without being identified as the culprit. It's quite silly and very over the top, but has some genuinely fun mysteries and a compelling overarching story. Now, Danganronpa 2 is probably one of the last games I'd expect a remake of, for multiple reasons, not least of which the fact that it's been ported over to basically every system imaginable in the last few years, so the original is very readily accessible. It's also a game I still think holds up pretty well. It's not really a game I would say is immediately begging for a remake. That being said, I do think there's a lot of potential improvement a Danganronpa 2 release could do. Because one thing I've often said to others is that Danganronpa 2 has a really great story, but it's not so good as a game. I still think it's perfectly playable, but there are a lot of small annoyances that add up to a sometimes frustrating experience to play through if you don't know what you're doing. Bad tutorials, obtuse puzzle solutions, and irritating and unfun minigames, especially improved Hangman's Gambit. Maybe some of that is the fault of the original localization. Hangman's Gambit in particular is a lot easier in Japanese because the words you have to spell consist of less characters. But there's still things where I could imagine improvements could be made for a more streamlined and fun experience. Honestly, that's my main hope for the game. I like it so much that all you need to do is improve the gameplay a little bit and the rest can hold up. We've seen it also has improved presentation and graphics. The 2D portraits can actually move now. But that's not something I really think is necessary per se. I get reminded of when I played Persona 3 Portable when it came out on Switch a few years ago. That game simplifies a lot of the presentation compared to the original PS2 release, but I actually didn't mind that. Actually, it made me realize something like Persona 5 could still play and function perfectly well without a sprawling 3D environment and big set pieces. Since at the end of the day, the core gameplay is a turn based RPG that only requires going through menus. You don't need fancy graphics to do a game like that. Although I do understand more fancy graphics probably do attract more people to a game. I just don't know how necessary it is for a good game. Speaking of things that are necessary, that brings me into one of the biggest questions I think everyone has been asking. Why remake Danganronpa 2 before remaking the first Danganronpa? I can say narrative-wise, even though Danganronpa 2 stars a different cast of characters, the story is very much improved by you having knowledge of what specifically happened in the first Danganronpa. It's kind of like Metal Gear Solid 2, where it's a sequel that's self-aware that it's a sequel and uses that to bring up themes of nostalgia, as well as playing with your expectations for interesting plot twists. The most educated guess for a reason I can think of is it's because Danganronpa 2 is probably the most popular game in the franchise, with the most well-loved cast, so Danganronpa fans are more likely to buy it. And then, maybe if it sells well, then they'll do the same treatment for Danganronpa 1 and V3. But I still think it's a weird choice, because doing a remake treatment with quality of life improvements and bigger, flashier graphics would be the kind of thing that attracts people who've never tried Danganronpa because they thought it looks too dated to give it a shot. But those kinds of people would be turned off Danganronpa 2x2 because it's the second game in the series, and they feel like they'd be lost if they started with this. This isn't Persona. Each game does actually build off the previous one, even if the casts are different. So wouldn't it almost beat the point of doing a remake? It kind of reminds me how Alpha Dream, the guys behind the Mario and Luigi series, remade Bowser's Inside Story because it was the most popular one. But then the remake didn't sell and they ended up filing for bankruptcy. Maybe the situation with Spike Chunsoft is different, but still, it's an odd choice. The other big thing about Danganronpa 2x2 is they've revealed it also includes a new story, where the killing game takes place with new victims and murderers from the last time around. And with this, I'm both curious and cautious. What sounds like an alternate universe retelling of Danganronpa 2 is a really interesting idea. It reminds me of a what if fan fiction, like the ones Dragon Ball fans really love doing for some reason. And any opportunity to go back and do a different spin on things could help flesh out characters or story elements that didn't get as much chance to shine in the original. And it can also help reaffirm just why I love this story so much. But I'm still a little cautious about it because new content doesn't necessarily mean good content. I think the original narrative is so strong and well paced that any reimagining might end up losing what makes the original work. Probably the exemplification of the reasons for my concern is that one CG we have of the new scenario shows Hajime Hinata and Nagito Komaeda. Nagito Komaeda is perhaps the most popular character in all of Danganronpa, at least when it comes to who has the most dedicated fan base. He is also, without getting too much into spoilers, a very difficult character to write. Within the story of Danganronpa 2, I think he just manages to ride the fine line between interesting and annoying. But times that he's returned to Danganronpa, like Ultra Despair Girls and the Danganronpa 3 anime, I feel haven't managed to keep that balance, and I kind of dislike his portrayals there. And see, one thing about Danganronpa is, like a lot of things big with otaku, there is a large and dedicated fan base that are really invested in BL, or boys love. Yaoi. Basically, there are Danganronpa fans who really like boys kissing in the homosexual way. A lot of the fans are women, and a lot of them really like the idea of Nagito and the protagonist Hajime being in a romantic relationship. It's not something that's explicitly in the original, although you could make arguments about it that it was hinted or it was in the side material. And the franchise isn't above pandering to lovers of BL, even before the game had a fan base. Basically, I'm worried that they're only making a new scenario, so this time they can make the ship official. And I don't know if I sound crazy or this is genuinely plausible. Mind you, I don't have anything against people who ship Komahina. I just think it would get in the way of the original narrative that Nagito is better as a dramatic foil for what the protagonist could be, and the idea of him getting together romantically with Hajime doesn't feel like the kind of closure I think both characters need. Really, this is the issue with most extra contents, or sequels, or fan fiction. Something that might have worked in the original might get stale if used too much in a sequel. Something that got popular with fans in the original might not work if given a bigger role in another version. And reimagining a story can lead to wildly new interpretations of a character, which isn't always a positive thing. You always hear people say, like, this character was ruined in the sequel, or something like that. So a new Danganronpa 2 scenario feels like it's genuinely at risk of that. And also given the fact that while I've enjoyed other Danganronpa content, nothing has quite hit the same highs as Danganronpa 2 for me. It feels like the game was perhaps a one-time lightning in a bottle, and trying to recreate that will end up treading on the original that I loved so much. I guess, we'll see. The original Danganronpa creative team are at least supervising what's going on from what I've seen on social media. So it's not like this thing is being made by strictly new people or fans with no understanding of what made the original so good. And I have been really enjoying the 100-line Last Defense Academy, Kodaka's most recent work that came out a few months ago. I recommend that one for anyone who's looking for more Danganronpa like shenanigans. But either way, it gives me something to look forward to next year. And who knows? Depending on how many thoughts I have about it, maybe I'll do another video on it once I play it. No guarantees though. I thought I was going to make a video about Dragon Ball Daima, but I genuinely had so much trouble even having opinions on it, I just couldn't get a script together. Sometimes things could be not even good or bad, but just so averagely okay, I have no thoughts that I think are worthwhile. If you ask a question, I'll try and answer it and give my opinion. But my pure thoughts? Sometimes more complicated. Sometimes things I don't think are worth sharing. That's why I enjoy making videos, because I only do them when I feel like I've got something useful to say. It may mean I'm only around here a few times a year now, but I still enjoy myself. But it's always nice to check in. I hope you guys are all doing well, and see you next time.